All right, thanks.
This meeting is being recorded.
Thank you.
All right. So we just got finished talking about some examples of brain development and differentiation in the infant, especially using examples around language development. And the same type of dynamic with new connections forming and irrelevant connections being pruned away, that's happening throughout brain development. Um, we can look at models of how birds learn songs. We have enough similarities in our brains with other animals that we can use these examples. You may have met a very intelligent sounding parrot who is making sounds that sound like words that you can understand. Well, how does that bird know how to make those sounds? It's a combination between an innate sort of mechanism for mimicking relevant sounds and the types of relevant sounds that are in the environment. So the more they hear it and the more they're reinforced, the more you'll hear those utterances. Now, some of you may be bird parents, but I think most of you are not bird parents. But the takeaway is that we can reinforce learning, and that's how humans have been doing it over and over for generations. We reinforce the cultural information that's relevant and important in our society, and we encourage our kids to take that on. We encourage it when we see them making steps towards maturing in that way, and we try to prune back or not encourage some of the behaviors that are not adaptive within our culture or society. So we do have this interaction between the mechanisms of our biology and the stimulus that we present through the environment and through our interactions with each other. When we get to the teenage brain, adolescent brain, there are a lot of changes. Through early and middle childhood, the brain development is going pretty fast. But there are these points of acceleration that we see. And we see fast acceleration when they're babies and toddlers. We see really fast acceleration when kids are transitioning from kids to teens. Now, what that acceleration looks like can come from a lot of different methods. Performance methods, we can look at brain imaging and activity studies. There are a lot of different methods that will confirm that there are big, major brain development events that happen in adolescence. So we can think about, well, biologically, what is important about adolescence? Well, reproduction, right? Students' bodies, kids' bodies start to become more mature and capable of sexual reproduction. Should that be accompanied by some brain changes? You bet. You bet. It's a completely different way of existing than when you are not biologically capable of reproducing. And so the functions that are adaptive for childhood may not be completely the full suite of abilities that's adaptive and necessary in adolescence. And then the skills and tendencies of adolescence may be great for adolescence and exploring and trying new things and testing your boundaries. They may not be as appropriate when you're 30 or 40 years old. I see some smiles because those of you with good senses of humor are thinking, wow, if my 40-year-old husband acted like he was his 15-year-old self, I don't know how I would react to that. Maybe it would be good. Maybe it wouldn't. um, but just that shows you how different types of traits, tendencies, and abilities are adaptive at different stages of our development. Um, so before we get really into a deeper dive on executive functioning, let's think about some of those contrasts between adolescence and adulthood. Because my assumption is, mostly adults in tonight's audience. And so that's going to be your frame of reference, is you are hearing this as an adult, and you've brought in with you all the knowledge that you've accumulated and held on to. That's the important thing. What have you held on to? Because you used to know other stuff. You used to think other stuff, or you maybe used to be open to other stuff that you aren't anymore. And so it's important to understand our own frame of reference as a parent, as an educator, um, when it comes to think about how we support our teens. Because we're different, right? We were more like them, but to think that we can just rely on those memories reliably to have the empathy that we need is an imperfect assumption. We have imperfect memories of our adolescence and childhood. And we may have misinterpreted things as adolescents that felt so right and so true then that are probably not true now. And whether you've reconciled with that or come to terms with that is another story altogether. That'll be for a much later talk. But we have to use our current lenses as parents and mature adults to think about what this interaction is between our kids and ourselves. Um, any questions about anything I've talked about so far? Okay, nothing yet. Please do chime in if are, because the nods, I'm seeing some nods and those are like exceedingly helpful. It's telling me I'm kind of on the right track here. Okay, but yeah, ask questions. This is really meant to be a talk. I want this to feel more like a group. If it weren't like Zoom, I don't know how you guys have your view set up with gallery or whatever, but in my mind, I would love for this to just be a circle, right? And I just happen to be the guy with the PhD monopolizing everybody's time. But absolutely, I encourage you guys to insert comments, questions, anecdotes, experiences. Okay, that'll really, really help it feel the way I want it to feel. Totally optional though. So now that we've established that there are differences, right, between an infant, a toddler, a kid, a teen, and an adult, and I think that's enough different, little caricatures to anchor our minds in. And we've established that we have a certain frame of reference as parents and adults. There are things that we prioritize that are different than what our kids and teens prioritize. And that makes a big difference. What's important to us? Because that's how we organize our lives and our behavior and how we interpret things, what we're listening out for, what we're trying to ignore and tune out. A lot of it is all about what we're currently valuing and prioritizing in our lives at the moment. So if you can, for just a moment, take a minute to think about an instance where your priority as a parent is different than your kids' what's important to you, right? Sometimes for me, getting out of the house on time is a priority, and it doesn't seem to be a priority for my kids. See, this is what I'm bad at. And
So I would say my child does not prioritize active listening.
oh, and you do.
I am trying to, yes.
Yeah. Okay. What are some other contrasts, examples of differences in priorities between you and your middle school-ish kids?
Well, I don't like being on my cell phone as much as my son does. And when people ask me questions, I normally don't make noises that sound kind of like, oh, or like flap my body around like, oh, like that.
So some differences in responding to other people. Maybe we see teens not listening or feeling so bothered by parents speaking to them that it causes them deep, deep pain.
Well, I think
What are
also
some-
the lack of planning is kind of shocking. Like, I feel like there's like a time in like fourth grade where my son was pretty good about saying like, I'm gonna go do this and then we're gonna do this. And I mean, I know I've told you this story, but anyway, I still can't believe that one morning he literally walked out of the door to go to school holding a breakfast burrito, a coat, and without his backpack and with no shoes on. And when I said, hey, wouldn't you like to put your shoes on and put your coat on? He was like, I guess, as though he was doing me this grand favor.
Yeah, thanks. Shanti, I saw your comment too. Pull that back up. Keeping things clean-ish, right? Some parents will say, I can't relax with all this mess here. Your stuff is everywhere. Clean it up. Definitely happens in my house too. And so it's just a difference in priorities, right? Your kids don't prioritize the tidiness. They don't maybe have the foresight to see, right? That all the reasons why we know keeping things organized and clean is helpful. Well, I won't have to help you find it again if you just put it away where it belongs. We won't step on it. We won't break it. It won't get mixed up with the other thing. I'll be able to walk. I'll be able to enjoy this couch. I'll be able to see other things and people. So we know as adults through all of our accumulated experiences that there are countless benefits to having a clean and organized space. But remember, your 12-year-old hasn't had that 30 years of accumulated experience yet, right? There were probably times when you weren't the tidiest and you lost things and you had things everywhere and it didn't bother you. You were just in your groove doing your thing. Hey, right now I am making Valentines for my friends, and I need this supply, I need that glitter, I need this paper. The good scissors are in the other room, and I'm gonna go get the things I need for the thing that I am focused on. I want to make this card so special. Oh, next card, I don't want the glitter anymore. I want the puff paint. And oh, the glitter can stay. It's not like it's bothering me. I just need to go get that puff paint. And so the puff paint comes along for the ride, and the hole puncher, and ooh, wouldn't it be great if there was some stickers? I got the perfect sticker. Where are those stickers, Mom? Yeah, those ones. Okay. And then everything starts accumulating. Is their priority anything but that card right then and now? Probably not. They probably are thinking ahead to, how will my friend think about this card? Or, should I write that word? Should I sign my name? Should I dot my I? Wait, what's the thing? Should I dot the I? Um, and those are some of the things that they're focused on and prioritizing. But the glitter and the puff paint going back in the craft box, putting your good sewing scissors back in the thing, um, not a priority. Totally different priority than what mom or dad will see. Mom, dad comes in, right? Just been paying the bills, doing the work, having the Zoom meetings. Turn the corner, and what do you see? Do you see the thought and care? And oh, I really hope that Michael loves this card when he gets it tomorrow. Parents don't see any of that. They see, "Aya, what a mess. You got glitter everywhere. You got puff paint on the couch. There's who knows what scissors tucked into the couch. What are you doing?" Right? Because your priority is different. Your priority is clean, tidy house. I don't want to go to sleep with all this out here. And I don't want to wake up to it. I want it to be how I want it to be, the way it was before you started this. Right? And that's pretty common. Like, that's a parent's priority. Finish your activity, and let's, get our home back to a state of, we can do something else. And it's not just, craft shop. Yeah, go ahead.
Do we have any questions from the translation rooms to share? Michael, Aisha, Louisa?
Okay. Thanks for
Thank you.
checking.
So Greg, how long does this last? I mean, I think I know you and I have discussed this, but this is the overarching question. We've seen massive changes. And how long are we in this for until, just like toddlerhood, we see the fruits of our labor essentially come to bear?
Well, I'm not going to answer that directly, Elisa, but I will tell you that there are a number of just brain imaging studies and functional studies on these executive functionings that indicate that in the U.S., within U.S. norms and U.S. sample, we don't see full maturation of the brain in typically developing people until 25. Age 25 is when we can say that all that the functions, and right, like who's conducting these studies, right? 40 and 50-year-olds, right? So they have this other standard, right? Of like, hey, you're not going to be able to run a research lab, get grants, and function and raise a family and do all these things and pay the bills and pick a vacation location until you're 25. Because that's what they see the full complement of adult life demands being, right? So again, frame of reference matters. Would a 17-year-old say, "I'm fully there. I am fully mature. I can't know more. I know everything, and I'm invincible"? I don't think I'm invincible. I am. Frame of reference, right? The older adolescents really think, hey, if I can vote, buy lotto tickets, and all the other stuff, click yes, I am 18 on all the websites, they think they've got it. And a lot of what in our society like signals to them, yes, you are an adult now, right? We have encoded it in laws. And then we have the precocious ones who at 16 or 17 were like, yeah, most kids read when they were 5, but I was reading when I was 3. So maybe 18 for you, but it's 16 for me. Haha. Right? There's a sense of like hubris and egotistic thinking that's totally adaptive and appropriate at those ages. But when we look at it as parents and adults, right, frame of reference, we say, oh, you've got so much to learn, right? There is so much more growing up for you to do. And so how long does this last? Different from other countries and cultures? Good question. I don't have any of the comparative data on that. I'm only familiar with studies that have really been conducted in the US and UK.
So to clarify, that was a question from the chat, right, that you're responding to? The question
yes.
from Rose that says, how does that differ from other countries' cultures? Is this brain physiology or environment?
Yeah, so my assumption would be physiological, not a whole lot of differences across the globe. But in terms of, you know, what's viewed as acceptable or not, right, those are cultural and societal expectations.
Great. And it looks like Aisha has a question.
Sorry, I'm not able to hear. Is it because of the rooms?
It might, I can hear you. So,
When I click the interpretation globe, I am listening in original audio interpretation off.
You should be in English.
Okay. Okay, can we try again, please? I'm sorry. Yeah, now I hear you.
Hey.
Thank you. That's really, really cool insight. That's the best thing about this. You get to learn. I get to learn from everybody else too. So Elisa, how long will this last? There are gains. There are going to be gains throughout. And so maybe, I think what I was trying to say by avoiding your question directly is that it might be useful to not think of it as something incomplete that we need to complete to be okay with it, but maybe a more useful frame of reference is to look at it as just a gift to be able to see them grow and develop and to be able to be witness to and part of the process. Because so long as it's still in movement and dynamic and changing, we can play a part in it and be a part of our kids' development and growth and maturation, right? Because once it's done theoretically, like it'll be done, right? So we never want it to be done. We want to have a degree of openness and flexibility even into our late years, right? I think one of the hardest things is I'm going on a total tangent now. You know, we spend so much more of our lives with our parents, if we're lucky, as adults, right? Like adult children, basically, right? Like I'm pretty sure my mom's gonna live till she's 100, right? So what, like that means 5/6 of my life will be knowing her as an adult compared to 1/6 of it as a child or teen. Um, and so I think it's cool. We don't want people to just stop, right, and be complete. I have a quote on my practice's website that says, um, "Becoming is better than being." Right? It's better. It's more fun to become than it is to just simply be.
Oh, I love that quote.
Um,
And I'm sorry to interject, Greg, but so middle school is a strange and sort of condensed, it's like a fall back to fall forward. And watching them grow and move is great. But it's, as we've discussed, like a little bit alarming. So I think I don't want to speak for everybody else, but for myself, like I just want to know, like, just like we talked about when I was like, it's really odd. Like Max used to be able to do this and now he can't. And
yeah,
you said, Elisa, that's developmentally appropriate. And I was like, really? Because I was gonna take my child to the doctor. And you were like, no, he's gonna be like that for like maybe about 3 years, but then he'll spring forward again. It's totally fine. So it's more like as we're parenting our lovely children whom we love so much and watching them grow, like what can we expect from this strange 3-year period where they fall back to fall forward, which is like, I could be wrong, but that's what it feels like. It's like a second
yeah,
toddlerhood where basically all of these developmental and hormonal changes basically attack their executive functioning skills, so that like it's like napalm for at least my son's brain, and it's not working. And but I love him, but what can I expect, Greg? What can we
yeah,
expect? How do we support this? And how do we adjust our boundaries in order to support them, but effectively parent them to move forward?
yeah. Great questions. Are other parents experiencing something similar where you saw a kid maybe function in a certain way up until some point, and then they just stopped functioning in that way? Oh yeah, people are starting to lean forward to see who else is going to raise their hand, right? Um, you know, okay. Remember a couple years ago, KonMari method was all the rage. Remember Marie Kondo? She's the home organizer and has these methods of keeping your house super organized. Um, I watched one of those episodes, and she was helping somebody clean out their house, and she took everything out of the closet and piled it on the bed. And she said, okay, now is your responsibility to pick up each article and look at it. Does it bring me joy? If it doesn't bring you joy, throw it away. Right? That's a good analogy, good model for what's happening in the teenage brain. Because ultimately, your end result is going to be more organized and useful and purpose driven, right? Just like your closet should be, right? As a tool for, putting, clothing yourself and equipping yourself for the day. But you have to get it there. You have to take it from this point where it was doing okay. I just started accumulating all this knowledge and skills. I can play Pokemon really well. I can, hacky sack with the best. I don't even know if kids hacky sack anymore. I don't think they do. Maybe there's an app for it. But I'm showing my age, right? But there's this, you acquire all these skills of childhood that make you so cool and so fun. And you're able to like learn songs, learn dances, and you just accumulate all the songs and dances and rhymes and insults and how to draw the S and how to make lightning bolts.
Lots of insults.
And you know what? That fills the closet, Elisa. And at some point, all of it has to come out, get thrown on the bed, and sorted. And that is one of the things that happens during adolescence, is there's a pruning of all the stuff. And you can't do it without a little bit of chaos, right? Those rooms that she's organizing look worse when she's in it than they started, right? They started and you're like, okay, it was cluttered, but there was some seed of organization at the beginning, right? Clothes were on hangers on a bar. Toys were, shoved into these cubbies. It was something.
So Greg, we're in the mess on the bed right now, right?
Yeah, we're in mess on the bed.
And how do we support that? And where do we draw the boundaries when they go? Like, how do we find a boundary to say, like, okay, that's too far. Like, that wasn't nice.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good question. And, there aren't any hard and fast rules, right? And, if there are specific examples in specific contexts with specific, social contracts and agreements that you already have in your family, right? You can leverage those, and it's going to be different in everybody's household, right? Some people have hey, we live our life by these rules and we never do that, right? But if you don't have that, it's going to be a hard time to introduce that, right? Maybe not too late, but it's going to be harder than if you have some structure to, your virtue value system, right? Like my kids, we have 3 things, and they get reinforced by Santa. They get reinforced by, all the fairies and wizards that bring them toys. That in order to keep receiving the toys and the treats and the nice stuff and the vacations, we operate on being kind, generous, and patient. Now that's just my household, right? And so every time there's something, if one of them's being unkind to the other, I can just go back and say, hey, was that kind? You living by kindness today? And they say no, and they know all the reasons why, right? And so it's good to have those anchors. But if you're, starting new with some of those, it's just going to take a little bit more patience.
Do you feel like the boundaries, sorry to interrupt you, but do you feel like the boundaries one needs to draw at this time need to be derived more from values you've already created, or at least the boundaries that you set? Like,
it's more helpful.
It's easier to say, like, hey, remember that one time we talked about how, like, this is what we don't do?
Right.
And then what do we do when they react? Like, I find for my son, he was more composed a few years ago, and now he's less composed, and then it flies off like a little squall in a storm. So like, in terms of his brain, is he absorbing that boundary and that interaction? And how am I supposed to help parent it? Because like, all of my friends who have 13-year-olds are going through the same thing. And we all think that our child is alone and we are alone.
Yeah. So, famous Brazilian educator and philosopher Paulo Freire wrote a brilliant treatise to talk about how we shouldn't educate our kids like we're putting deposits in a bank account, right? This banking model is not so useful anymore. We're teaching them to be the authors of their own future and the authors of their own lives. And so, the remember when, and those, are they absorbing it? Probably, right? But are they also testing it? Are they stretching it, testing the limits of it? Absolutely.
So
Is
can you
that
tell us
developmentally
more about the
appropriate?
purpose of the
Absolutely.
testing and the effectiveness of it? Because like when they were toddlers, it seemed vaguely clear in a strange, chaotic way, but now it's sometimes clear and at least to me, sometimes unclear.
I don't think it's clear to them either, right? They're not coming at this with any intentionality of I will test this uh, boundary right now in a systematic way. No, it's just kind of happening, right? They're learning by experience. They're right. So when you don't have this inhibition, right? Because that's one of the things they will in the developing brain, in a maturing brain, you develop a good inhibitory control system that'll tell you to stop. It's too much. It's that's the boundary, right? But it takes time to develop that, right? That is a product of the development, is knowing when to inhibit and stop. But
So,
in this
so
growing
during
phase,
this time period, like this 12 to 14-year-old stage, what's happening to that inhibitory system? Can you tell us more about that?
um, a lot of it's in flux with everything else. So I think now is a good time. Um, there was a handout. Did we get that circulated? Okay. So maybe I can share my screen. Am I able to share my screen? Do I have the capacity? Uh, I'll need to be allowed to share my screen. While we're working on that, I'll do my best to answer your question without the visual. Um, exactly what's happening to Max today, I can't tell you. We simply don't have the methodology for me to do that from this room. But what I can tell you in general is that you know there is a loosening of inhibition in adolescence, and we'll want to think about how is that adaptive, right? What was good about that for our species to have all these, you know, newly pubescent humans running around without the inhibitory control that they once had. What's good and healthy about that? What's adaptive for a culture? At least it's saying nothing.
No, I'm sure there are many things, but living with said people is different.
Yes.
And I know that actually our cultures have changed vastly. Like he would be an adult in some cultures at this point. So I understand that.
Yeah.
I'd like to know what's good and adaptive about it, though. Waiting for that.
Greg, I've made you co-host, which should grant you sharing permissions.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, we've got another hand up. So we're gonna get to, but I want you to sit with it and think about it first. Like think about like culturally, population wide, like what's useful for having your new teens and tweens start to lose inhibition about lots of different things. Okay, just sit with that dissonance for a while. It's no fun if I just give you the answer right away. Rose has a hand.
Okay, so I was just thinking about, and I don't know if this helps. This has helped with my son. I have a 13-year-old. And the way I see it, and I read it somewhere, is like after 11 years old, from like birth to 11 years old, they will only need our approval. We're their tribe, we're their parents, we're everything they have, and that's all they need. When they reach adolescence, they need to find a new tribe, a tribe of friends. Now they're looking for approval of their friends. And that's why you see the switch in personality. That's what I read. And I try to calm myself down when I see that kind of behavior with that logic. And that would be like the social sort of benefit of adolescence, starting to acculturate, to become part of the broader tribe and not just our families. I don't know if that helps, but I figure I would say it.
Was that helpful, Maria? I see some smiling and nodding. Good. Yeah. Um, I think that's a great way to put it. They like teens care so much about what other teens think. And think about some examples of teens where a lot of kids are trying new things, having fun, going off on an adventure, and there's someone who's still more inhibited, right? They're just not on the same at the same step as them, right? There are maybe 5 kids. Yeah, we're ready to throw safety to the wayside and go and jump off of this thing into the lake. And maybe a couple kids just aren't there yet. And so is it good or bad? Right? We struggle with that as parents. Like we want to know, is this good or bad? This is new. Is this good or bad? We want to like judge. And I say, let's just perceive first, right? Let's just take our time and just perceive and take it in. Then automatically try to judge good or bad, evaluate good or bad. So is it good or bad if 75% of the kids jump and 25 stay back? Well, it depends. Are you a parent who's like, yeah, go jump off that thing? Or are you the parent who's saying, oh, good thing you didn't jump off with those crazy kids, right? So it totally different frame of reference depending on what you value and prioritize as a parent. It's like, oh my God, all your friends who you did this activity with are moving on and doing the next thing. Why do you still want to keep doing your little kid stuff, right? It's like, well, clearly you value them being in step with if you see it as like not good, you value them keeping up with their, old friends, and you don't want them to like fall behind, right? And so what's keeping them from going out and trying the new risks is it, well, they're not at that stage yet in terms of losing some of that inhibitory control. And so it's not like the end all be all to be, right, just have, things holding you back from everything. There's a appropriateness to it, and it's always in doses. It's never like a black and white. They have to be completely wild and out of control, or they have to be super reserved, right? Aristotelian mean, Aristotle, virtue lies in the middle, right? So we say, in this case, like recklessness and cowardice, 2 ends of the spectrum. Neither of those is a virtue. The virtue is in the middle, which we call bravery, right? And so we have to think about things in those terms. There's nothing very absolutist when we're talking about human development and how we value it. Things are going to be relative and come based on our frame of reference. But those are good questions. Those are really good questions. So, right, do you want your 14-year-old to be as inhibited as your 80-year-old mother? Like, I hope not, right? Like, she doesn't want to do anything new. Like, she can't do anything new. And that's okay. She's found something that's worked for her, and she's good like that, right? But your 13-year-old, like, no, if you were to go hang out with Nana, like, no, you want them to like have fun, explore, try new things, and right, because that's what most kids are doing at that age. So you want them to have some of that. And it's something that we just have to kind of like let happen, but we want them to know how to be safe, right? And so as a little self-disclosure here, like I really struggled with my executive control of my attention and things like that when I was a kid. I mean, like I pushed that 25-year thing. I really pushed it. And so I feel like I have a lot of empathy for kids who are smart but scattered, or who are told a million times, right? It's like, wow, like, does my mom only know one number? A million? Like you told me a million times. No, I think you told me like maybe 12, but yeah. I think million was the only number that she knew after she turned 40. Um, so I have a lot of empathy for kids who, yeah, like, now that you mentioned it, I do remember you telling me that, but that lesson wasn't coming up into my consciousness at the time that this opportunity was present, and with all these other pressures to do it. So I just went along with what everyone else was doing. I went along with what I thought felt good, and I didn't see, it was a blind spot. Right? Like, if I were like, could like embody my 14-year-old self and like have the phrase of, it was a blind spot that I didn't see at the time. If I had that phrase, I'd probably use it every day when someone would, check me on something, whether it was a teacher or a parent or even a peer. If I could only know how to put the words together, I'm sorry, that was just a blind spot in the moment. It would have explained so much and helped me out so much and repair a lot of hurt feelings, I think. Because I
So
think
how do we
sometimes
support them through those blind spots? Because
we can
that's
help
a
them
great
identify
point.
them.
But like when you're around adolescents who need support through that time, like how is it best to support them and maybe redirect them
Yeah, I think they have to take on some
without judging
responsibility.
them?
Yeah,
Okay,
I
and
don't
how do
think,
we
I
do
don't
that?
think we can, like, I don't think there's like a magic bullet, but it's a process.
Okay.
Um,
And what does
but
that process
let's put our
involve?
hand up.
I have a hand up because I actually wanted to, as you were talking, one of the questions that I had was, what are some of the things? So we know lower executive functioning, lower lower or less inhibited. What are some of the other things that are coming up in our roadmap of,
Yeah.
my teenager is, their brain's changing. What else should I be watching for so I can know what to try and support?
Great question. I'm going to bring up the visual now. That's a perfect segue for me to. Um, okay, which. Oh, I have to grant access for the recording. Can you
Okay.
see?
Or would you like me to pull it up and share it?
Oh, yeah, if you can pull it up. But
I have the
I may have.
PDF and I can share it.
Oh, great. Oh, I got it too.
You got it?
I think so.
I don't see it.
No? Okay, then I don't got it. I got it, don't got
I got it, don't got it. Okay, let me try.
it. Thank you.
Do you see it?
All right. Okay, so one of my favorite resources, couple of authors who have written a lot together, Peg Dawson and Richard War. Smartbutscatteredkids.com is their website. They have a book by that title and other things related to that. So, right, we have this response inhibition. Coincidentally, the first thing on the list, we didn't plan this, but the ability to resist those urges, to give yourself time to evaluate a situation. Right? So that's what we've been talking about. And the question is, what are some of the other things that we can anticipate? So if we scroll down a bit, there's about a dozen of these different executive skills. Working memory is another one that will undergo some changes. Being able to hold on to information while performing a complex task. This is related to multi-step directions and complex multi-step procedures. We will see some changes in that. Usually it matures and the capacity gets a little bit better. They start to learn techniques called chunking, rather instead of, when you're, not that anyone has to remember phone numbers anymore, but right, if you remember all 10 digits of an area code, the prefix, and then the last four, that's hard if it's just a string of 10. But if you chunk it in a group of three, a group of three, and a group of four, we increase our capacity there. Emotional control is another executive functioning skill that we see changes in the adolescent brain. And that's looking at the chat, there's a comment. These are all skills for kids with ADD, it seems. So, about 15, 16 years ago, there were some really great papers after intense study on some of the neurological foundations of what we see as ADHD symptoms. And it's not so much an attention deficit, but the deficit is in being able to intentionally control your attention, which places it squarely in the camp of executive functioning. So good observation there. Being able to manage your emotions, to deal with frustration and persist, to be misheard, misunderstood, and still be part of the conversation. These are parts of emotional control that are in flux in the developing brain. Sustained attention, being able to really focus on something, limit your response and reaction to distractions. We see some changes there in terms of what types of things can sustain one's attention. Task initiation, knowing how to get started. Can I, even though I really don't want to, can I start outlining that essay now instead of waiting till the very last minute? That requires executive control. You'll never feel like it. There's always going to be something more fun or more enjoyable. But can the person put those things aside because they've already anticipated the consequences of not getting it done? Planning and prioritization, you notice that a lot of these are related, right? The idea isn't that these are mutually exclusive and separate factors. These are all skills and they're interrelated skills. So being able to make decisions based on what's really important. Now, again, going back to where we started, that frame of reference is going to be different in terms of what we see as important, right? Hey, I'm prioritizing the Valentine, not, how flawless and Instagrammable the living room looks like right now. General organization, we've talked about that. Creating systems, right? Or just going along, perceiving the system and going along with it. Like my kids have their socks and underwear in the top drawer and their t-shirts and shorts in the next, sweaters and long pants in the other. Now we got them we're trying to get them to put their own laundry away. And so, could they open a drawer, stuff it all in and close it without me knowing? Yes, they absolutely could. But what they'll get reinforced for is following along with that system of organization that, their mother already put in place for them. And that's going to be in flux and changing. If you want, to help them, you can let them be authors of the organization. I think I want to pause here, not go through the rest of the list. I trust that this will be shared with everybody because I think it's a pretty useful, quick resource. But I want to pause at organization. That's something that I already started talking about with cleaning the closet. So I'll stick with that example. So how do we help our teens be organized or develop a system of organization? We need to pull the curtains back and explain to them what we were thinking when we put that system in place. And we say, tell them like what the end goals were. We're like, look, we want you to be able to find your things. We want them to be not completely wrinkled. We want you to be able to just know where your things are so it doesn't take you more time than it already takes to get dressed in the morning and go to school, right? The faster you can find your socks and underwear and clothes, the easier it's going to be. And so you got to sell them on the result. You got to convince them like, yeah, wouldn't you love it if there was a magic button that you could press where all your socks were exactly where you wanted them to be, all your underwear were where you wanted them to be, your t-shirts, your pants. If you could press a magic button to just have them exactly where you wanted them in the morning, would you press that button? Yes, Mom, I would press that button. Well, son, that magic button doesn't exist, but we can approximate it by doing this, by creating this system and following it. It might work. And you say, but honey, you don't have to do it my way. If you want the socks and underwear at the bottom drawer and you'll put your things there and you'll know that that's where they are to find them, go ahead. I don't care whether they're in the top drawer, bottom drawer, you go ahead and move them to the bottom drawer and let them take some role of authorship in those systems. Because I don't know, maybe your system of organizing isn't the same way your parents did it, but it worked for you, right? So I think it's the time to start really, being in that pivot position with your kids. Say, okay, hopefully what we do now, you can start to develop your own systems of organization that you'll bring with you and maybe modify as your furniture changes or your living arrangement changes. But at least you know why you want to keep your things organized. Is that making sense to folks? You seeing? I see a little nodding. Okay, that's good. Let's move on. Time management. This is something to struggle with, like new activities, right? Kids, every grade, there's some new assignments, right? There are things that you did in doing in seventh grade that you never did in sixth. Things you did in sixth that you never did in fifth. And you don't know how long they take. You don't know how long it takes. And so for a kid to effectively manage their time, it's almost like they have to bump into things. They have to say, ooh, I started that too late and I didn't finish it in time. It's helpful if a parent says, hey, I noticed that you were really rushing with that at the end. When I looked at the clock when you started, it was 5 o'clock. Maybe let's start that assignment at 4:45 next time. And then you might not feel so rushed at the end, right? These are ways that we can help them just by being a helpful observer and coach.
Greg, I do want to do really quick. We're approaching 8 o'clock, which was our end time.
Yeah.
So I just want to be aware of that.
Thank you. We've got a handful more. Being persistent, being flexible, metacognition, and stress tolerance. Let's, we've got a hand up. I'd rather do the hand than the list.
Sure. Aisha? Yes.
Yes. All right, yeah, thanks. Hmm. Oh yeah. Okay. Mhm. That's a huge question. I don't think I have any direct answers for you on how. I don't even think I have like all the insights I would need to address that. But it's common to a lot of immigrant communities, right? This acculturation. There's going to be differences. If from the parent perspective, yeah, you want to keep your kids close. They are in a way like a bridge for you, for the parents, into the broader community, with language barriers and things like that. Is it developmentally appropriate for the teens and the young people to differentiate from, their family? Yeah. And so parents, I just want to acknowledge that parents have, that struggle, and it's not outside of the norm, and it's not, restricted just to the Somali community. I think all immigrant communities deal with something like that. And, just I think having organizations, having groups that are, different. I know in my neighborhood, like I live around Rainier Vista, I see a lot of the moms together, and they're not socializing with the men. And so where do the boys go? Right? The moms want them to maybe stay close for safety, but it's not modeled. They don't see that. There maybe isn't like space for that in their mind with learning American culture or South Seattle culture in particular. And so I just want to acknowledge that the challenge is there, and it's they're not alone in that. As far as the depression and leading to drug use, again, that's something that a lot of teens experiment with, right? With the losing inhibition, trying new things. But if you can provide them with other opportunities to experiment. Maybe they can experiment with sports. Maybe they can experiment with art. Maybe they can experiment with other things that aren't potentially as habit forming and dangerous as drugs. Those are some alternatives you can present to them to still fill that function, that need to experiment and do new things. Thank you all. I know we're at time. Thanks for hosting again. If folks want to follow up with me, I'll put my email in the chat. It's Dr. Moy at seattlechildpsych.com. I just, if anyone is willing to, just help me out. I just created a website. I did it myself. That was my experimenting. I developed a website for my practice, and I just put a Facebook page for it. So if you can go search for Seattle Child Psychology on Facebook, leave me a note, leave me a message, a review or something. That might be helpful, because it's a brand new. I just signed the lease for this month, and I'm unfortunately for all of y'all, I'm located up in Edmonds. I got a lot of reasons for that, but if you want to talk more, or if you think that I could be of service to your families or other people in your community, just send me a note. I'm always just, trying to help folks out and share the knowledge that I have. So thank you all again. Thank you for being present, for caring enough about your kids that you will sit through my long droning and attempts at humor. I'm really proud to have you all as neighbors. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us tonight. And I hope that everyone at least walks away with something new that they didn't know before.
Dr. Moore, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you and donating your time to us. That's really important and very special.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.